Camp counselors, what is the weirdest thing you've seen happen at camp? Viewers edition. Story 1. At camp I went to, there was a counselor who got gang attacked by 40 kids, all around 5 to 8 years old, and those little mustards tackled him and ripped his pants off and stole his pants. He was fired for exposing himself to kids. He was charged, but I found out he was not convicted because his defense attorney got a copy of the videotape from the police because the camp had security cameras, and he not only got off from the charges, but sued the crap out of the camp for not giving him a single person to help him watch dang near 80 freaking kids all by himself. I was one of the very kids that was not crazy, putting themselves in danger. Heck, they allowed all the kids into the grassy area that was not fenced in, and if they allowed that stuff now, the camp would have been sent straight to heck by the parents. Many parents actually went back to the counselor and tried apologizing for their children's actions, but he was having none of it after those ran through the court system and through heck. He was one of the best counselors ever, and only 40 kids physically attacked him and even broke his arm and gave him a severe concussion, and he had dozens of bite marks from kids literally biting him, and some of them drew blood. The head of the entire place got a new head counselor who did not take any crap from anyone, and that woman I respected. If you attempted to tick her off, your butt was done. She fired anyone who even attempted to do anything against her will. She turned that place into a child-safe camp that was also extremely fun. She actually played with us, and even taught us to play well together, and we were even able to play games like tag football, where you had to pull the ribbon on the other person, or even capture the ribbons, to where your team had to take the other team's ribbon to win, and she was skilled. She literally had the tags placed on her ankles and wrists and waist, and all 200 of us kids just had to get one off her to win, but she had to take all 4 off each kid to win. She won all 500 times we played against her. It went from horrifying near death of a counselor by monsters to salute the Supreme Commander because you did not want to tick her off. She actually liked me and allowed me to be all alone in a room stacking the chairs, which also gave me the chance to be the first to have snacks. She set up pizza parties for the kids for lunch, and I was allowed to set up the tables and chairs and get my own pizza and chips and soda first, before all the other kids. It's probably because she trusted me more than anyone. I may have been a bit of a teacher's pet as a kid, so much so that the vice principal of my middle school gave me 1 copy of the key to the bike rack. 3 people had keys to that bike rack: the vice principal, Fred the monitor, and myself, a 6th grader, who had that key until my last day of 8th grade. Oh, the power I held as a kid in middle school. I had to give that key back in 2004, but I had the key to the school, and if any kid ticked me off who also rode a bike, their bikes were locked in. I had one kid who cussed me out and insulted me. He called his father, and his father came to yell at me and demand I unlock the gate. I told his father the kid was a brat and cussing me out and being a brat, all because I wanted to finish my chess game, and he could not wait 2 minutes for me to have finished the game and to go open it for him. I also locked it 5 minutes after school ended, which was right before I went to go to the chess, because I knew that some kids did not have bike locks, and during school, I would lock up the bike cage, and kids who came late would require a key. It was for protecting the other kids' bikes. Because of the cage, many kids did not want to carry a heavy bike lock with them, and knew the cage would keep the bike safe. And yeah, you were not going to break that cage. The lock was not a master lock, but some weird lock from Japan, and it even had "Made in Japan" written on it. It would have been near impossible to pick it. Well, when I told the kid's father what happened, he scolded the kid and told the kid that he would have to walk back to school on Monday to get his bike after school before he could ride home if he apologized, and I allowed him to get his bike out. This was on a Friday and screwed up the fact that it was his brand new bike and he was going to go riding with his friends on a camping trip to dirt jumps, and he sold his old bike to a friend of his father who got it for their younger son, so he had no bike. The dude was completely messed up for the weekend. He actually got on his hands and knees begging for my forgiveness, but the messed up fact was I forgot he ticked me off because I was too busy playing video games. I opened it and he got his bike and rode off. The word got spread to not tick me off, and no one who rode a bike ticked me off after that, and in fact, they were very scared to do anything wrong, because they did not want their bike sealed away. There was no way to steal the key because the key was on my lanyard on my neck with the other keys, making my lanyard weigh about 10 pounds. Yeah, I may have a bit too many keys on my lanyard at times. If I get attacked, that thing is like a swinging mace. Whoa, okay, that was a ride. I guess moral of the story is, if anyone ever asks you whether you would rather fight 40 child-sized humans or one adult-sized human, definitely opt for the one adult-sized human, because the 40 child-sized humans evidently leads to a very convoluted series of events. Story 2. I ain't a camp counselor, but my story's wild all the same. Oh, and I'm 12, just so you know. Alright, here's my story. I can't share this story on my animation channel until I'm 18, so at least I can share it here. I started going to sleepaway camps around 2 years ago. My first year, I was bunkmates with this pretty obese kid. We'll call him Bob? Yeah, Bob. Anyway, I got to camp and he was the first kid I met. I thought he was a potential friend. I liked him for about 30 minutes. He was very weird, mostly with food. I will never get the image out of my head when he took an Expo, scribbled on some chips, threw them on the ground, stomped on them, then scooped them all up and ate them. And the worst part was that his shoes were caked in mud. Muddy Expo chips. Gross. He was very entitled. After 2 days, I befriended basically the entire cabinet except for him, and for the next 3 days I was there, because I was only staying for a week. He would constantly say that random stuff that either someone or no one owned was his. Like, that tree is mine, or I hate my bed, let me use yours. He was so annoying. So to get back at him, I stole his beloved rock that he painted to look like a hamster. He tortured all of us trying to find it. Oh shoot, I've been talking about my first year at that sleepaway camp for too long. Here's the actual reason why I've typed all of this. Last year, I asked for very specific people in my cabin. I literally got the exact opposite. All of my old friends went into one cabin, and literally the only person I didn't want in my cabin was in my cabin, Bob. Now that I think about it, I'm very glad he was in my cabin. Then I wouldn't have known about this situation. Anyway, this year he just out of the blue revealed that he was bi. Nothing bad about that, but for some reason, he was worse than usual this year. Maybe he thought that now he revealed he was bi, he became himself, a psycho pervert Karen. He would hit people, spank literally anyone, and be just very entitled little fat witch. But one day he did something out of the blue, and this just wasn't the icing on the cake. No. This was the entire barrel of icing. Here it is. There was a little room in the back of the cabin, probably the size of a big closet. He decided to make it his own room. The first sign was Bob's Segs Dungeon. Like, bruh, you gonna really name it that? That's just really weird, kid. He renamed it to Bond's Casino, though, and he traded those bands that, friendships bracelets. Anyway, there was this small kid in our cabin. He was a bit quiet and kept to himself, but everyone liked him. Bob probably liked him a bit too much, if you know what I'm saying, because one day he decided to freaking R the small kid. I mean, not R, unless you call dry humping with clothes on, and forcefully doing it R. Bob freaking humped this kid. In most countries, that is probably a little bit of R, which is very illegal. My friend told me all this at lunch, and Bob actually tried to do it to my friend too. Luckily, he escaped. The small kid went home out of traumatization, and Bob stayed for about 2 more days before the counselors actually did something, which was send him home, and not accept him back. So now he ain't coming back. That's my story. A long story, but a good one. My parents found out and were furious. They made sure that Bob is never going back. Hopefully. The end. If any of you are a stutterer, then come on down to good old Camp Say, a camp for stutterers. Story 3. The weirdest thing I had seen while counseling was when a 4th grade boy in my cabin had a crush on another one of the counselors, so we had the crush talk in the cabin the night before. So the next morning, while we have to get everyone up and ready for breakfast, as I'm trying to get everyone up, another counselor walks by and says, "Good morning." This was the counselor that the boy had a crush on, so he shot up and walked outside to go talk to her, and as he's talking to her, another kid in the cabin shouts he has a crush on you. So she blushes and starts to walk away. But now here's the thing that he says that made her start to gag and run away. So he says, "Don't worry, I have experience with girls." That made her run away gagging. But then as he walked back into the cabin, another boy said, "Ooh, you got rejected." So what he does is he runs up to him and punches him in the face. Also, the whole thing about the counselors is very much so true. Story 4. I'm not a camp counselor, but when I was in Boy Scouts, we had an incident during our week-long summer camp where late at night a small group of drunk people ran into the small dock right by our campsite with their boat. Some of the older scouts, they were about 14, 15, 16 at the time, saw this and immediately started taunting and heckling the drunk people. This ticked them off. They got out of their boat. One of the older scouts said, "Hey, come and get me," as he's standing about halfway up the steep hill with one of the drunk guys right below him. Drunk guy grabs this kid by the leg, pulls him down, and starts beating the crap out of him. The others that were with him jumped down to help him, and a full-blown fight broke out and lasted for a minute or two until the scoutmasters had to come down and break up the fight. Story 5. Camp counselor, full-time. This summer we had some really wild stuff go down as usual, but the craziest stuff was one of the camp counselors broke into one of the boathouses, hooked his phone up to the giant speaker over the side of the building that they play chill music over while the kids go sailing, and blasted Playboy Cardi at 3 in the morning across the lake, so that basically the entire camp heard it. Safe to say he didn't last very long. I would have said it was something sensual, but that stuff is so frequent at my camp, it's almost lost its shock factor. Story 6. I never stayed at overnight camp, but I remember one kid was playing some basketball with the group of us, and he randomly said, "Hey, ow!" I thought he stepped on a rock or something, but turns out he jammed a pebble inside his ear that happened to be kicked from under someone's shoe. The counselors tried to use tweezers to get it out, but called the parents. Eventually, he went to the hospital for a doctor to get it out. After that, we all knew him as just the coolest of the group. Story 7. Alright, don't get me wrong, what Billy did was terrible, and I'm also aware that his father was the root of the problem, and he is mostly to blame. But if you're saying 10 to 12-year-olds shouldn't know what intercourse is, I completely disagree. You definitely should know what human reproduction is at the ages of 10 to 12. I mean, learning what intercourse is at 13 seems to be very late. Story 8. You know, that Ziploc condom story? I used to be friends with this one person who claimed to have done that. I never believed him. This was well before YouTube was really a thing. I thought it was still a dating website at the time, since this was in the 1990s. This was also 5th grade, by the way. X, if you somehow see this, I apologize for not believing you. Story 9. I did not do such holy things in my middle school Bible camp, like one time hitting someone with shaving cream even though they had a bad sunburn. I also called them Larry the Lobster. That person was and still is my boyfriend, so I guess God smiles upon those who have decent humor, and those who put banana spiders in their girlfriend's hairs. Fun times. Story 10. A close friend of mine helped organize a fight club between counselors and kitchen staff at a Christian camp and conference center in the mountains. Only one hospitalization. Knockouts happened. They would start out sparring, then fall into full-on battle royale on this field at night. Full contact, and all for fun. All friends together at breakfast. Story 11. The thing is, kids are growing up with the internet and finding out about it way earlier than I did. Got curious and found it at 12. I remember going to cricket practice and hearing a kid no more than 8 saying he would jam down, slang for buckshot, this girl. That ain't the first time I've heard kids way younger already talking like that. Story 12. Not a counselor, but a camper. My favorite part of the summer was when, on the last day, we all put our bed mattresses on the floor and let the counselors totally spill the tea about everything that summer. As in, who hooked up with who was dating, what they did on breaks, and everything. It was so fun. Story 13. I had a story, not a counselor, but another attendee. This is a prestigious establishment, so I'll not be saying the name, but this one kid had a toy creeper, and this thing had been through a lot. The other people had nicknamed it the PDA creeper. Needless to say, this thing had been filled more than once. Story 14. Want to know the weirdest thing I saw as a camp counselor? Some weirdo with a hockey mask was running around with a machete and his mom's head. It was weird. Luckily, I struck a deal with him. As long as I brought my dream demon out for him to fight it, he wouldn't kill me. Story 15. Teens are weird, is the only explanation I can give. I'm sorry if that's underwhelming. I also just yelled, "Why are you doing this to me? Do you know how much paperwork is going to have to be done because of this?" Story 16. Camp counselor here. Kid drew their cabin mates unalive, and my coworker hung. They drew this on the wall and did this because they had a mental meltdown. That night, they slept in the main building in the room next to and connected to mine. I didn't sleep for a while. Story 17. Just a question. Why do you keep asking people these questions? I mean, I was surprised very much at how many stories there are, and most are mega what the F moments. The way it was said, 2 more days of joy before I break this little heart, was kind of evil. Story 18. I was a bit of a jerk when I was in camp. I ate a cheese sandwich inside out. I made the camp counselors uncomfortable. I knew that at the time it just messed with them. I guess I was a jerk. If someone from that camp is reading this, I'm sorry. Story 19. But because of phones and TikTok, they learn it much earlier than they should. As I said before, the kids I've heard saying this kind of stuff are no more than 8. And because of its trending, they will get curious and then stumble across it and then try it. Story 20. Kid tripped on a log, fell on a rock. Ambulance took 45 minutes to get there, 26 staples, and 36 stitches later, he was better. So I thought. 4 months later, I found out that the wound got infected, and they just got rid of the infection a week before. Story 21. The one story with the camp owner's son smoking weed in a room full of kids, I assume it be one of those main lodge house hall buildings, is the least weird story, and actually pretty tame compared to some of the other stuff that was going on. Story 22. I was a counselor at a teen camp a few years back. Strangest thing I saw was a 17-year-old stuffed in a suitcase being dragged around the perimeter of a cabin by 4 completely nude 15-year-olds. Story 23. I'm a summer camp counselor, and so many of these stories horrify and humor me. I think a lot of these are overnight camps, but it's still funny seeing how scandalous counselors can be. Story 24. What the frick is wrong with all the parents of these kids? Billy sadly thinks friends come from abuse, and so many 10 to 12-year-olds know about and what to do to reproduce. It's so wrong. Story 25. When I was a camp counselor, we had a scout, Boy Scout camp, shove a lit log into one of the latrine's toilets. Took the firefighters nearly an hour to put out that mess. Story 26. The counselor wasn't just a kid at the camp, but went to a camp where one kid had brought a gun from home in his bag and threatened to shoot me with it. Story 27. As someone who has both attended and staffed summer camps, I'm now a little annoyed I never got to hear the good gossip of people doing it. Story 28. Can someone for the love of God explain to me what patty cake they're talking about? Because I'm pretty sure that it's not the children's version. Story 29. It was a break from all the raunchy stuff in the rest of the video, but that's not necessarily a good thing. I nearly cried at that story. Story 30. Yes, exactly. Learning at that age is fine. It's when they actually start trying to do it at that age when things become wrong. Story 31. Well, another counselor and I would sneak off into the woods sometimes and bang. Does that count? We're married now. Story 32. I lost it at that Ziploc condom story. I never thought I'd ever hear someone MacGyver their way to have safe whoopee. Story 33. Not a counselor, but went to camp for archery. It was maybe day 5 before one kid snapped and shot another kid. Story 34. 2 first-grade boys made out while everyone was eating lunch one year when I worked as a camp counselor. Story 35. I saw some counselors making out while a kid named Jason was drowning. Pam lost her cool and her head. Story 36. Tip: a child does something really bad, then you get permission to scream and beat him or her or them up. Story 37. So what I'm getting from this the most is that if you become a camp counselor, you have to have a lot of whoopee. Whoopi Goldberg. Story 38. I'm just surprised kids have fun in summer camps. I remember my experience was always miserable. Story 39. I mean, some of the stories would probably make them worth it if they were to happen to me. Story 40. I went to a camp where 26 boys stayed in the same room. There were a lot of balls shown. Story 41. Story 4 caught me off guard. Just hearing it spoken out of the blue was absolutely hilarious. Story 42. What is this patty cake thing? And I feel it doesn't have to do with the children's games. Story 43. Only real thing I got out of this is, if I want to get laid, be a camp counselor. Story 44. I now know that all the Friday the 13th counselors weren't so unrealistic. Story 45. Okay, I'm a camper. I saw someone feasting on sunscreen and chapstick. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.